Y'all ready for this? Welcome to Sports Kid, Drama Kid. I'm Jim. I'm the Sports Kid.
I'm Andy. I'm the Drama Kid.
If you don't know, we have a Patreon, and there you can get bonus episodes.
And if you've been enjoying the show, please leave us a review on whichever platform you listen to. Stars, you can write something. Anything is super helpful.
So the Super Bowl just happened. We're finally done with football for about 5 seconds. And this is the time when the sports world every year switches over to March Madness as like the main event, usually.
Yeah.
You know, the NBA is always going on right now. You love it, but it's kind of the middle of the season.
Yeah. This is also when I'll wander into the living room and find you watching like some weird like ESPN 6.
Yeah. I'm watching
tag tournament. Like,
yeah, or
what was it? Not laser tag, freeze tag. What is it?
I think there's literally like
I think it's just tag.
Yeah, that they sometimes put on ESPN.
Yeah.
Late at night. Yeah, it's the lead up to the college basketball tournament. Those games obviously matter, but they're not that fun to watch usually. Not as fun as the tournament, at least not at the end. So we're in that little dead zone. But we're gonna ramp up for March Madness with a March Madness episode that's probably one of the biggest drama-wise in like March Madness history.
As little as I know about professional sports, I know even less about college sports.
So I have gone to the March Madness tournament like every year since I was in middle school.
I don't even know if we were dating yet. I just remember you like texting me from the March Madness trip and you're like, I'm in Omaha, LOL.
Yeah. So this started, back in like middle school. My dad got the idea to go with my brother, grandpa, and I to somewhere for the March Madness tournament because we're like, we can go to it. Like, we really love watching it on TV. And then we decided to go one year. I don't remember what the first one even was. And then we usually stuck around the Midwest general area, but we've gone other places, and we'll go for like the first and second round, or recently we go for the Sweet 16 because the games are better.
You've been to a lot of cities that otherwise people don't consider destinations.
Yes, let's see.
Like
Omaha,
Dayton,
like
Ohio.
3 times, Dayton, Ohio, multiple times.
Salt Lake
Salt
City.
Lake was kind of cool.
Yeah. I think you went to Kansas City, which
yes, Kansas City
is cool.
We went to Pittsburgh. We went to Louisville. Providence 3 times.
Oh
We've gone to all these places so many times to watch games.
They're cool. They're all, cool cities in their own way. And I haven't been to some of them, but yeah, you're never going to like, I don't know, LA.
No. This year we might go to Dallas if we go. So that'll be a little more of a change of pace and get a little bit of a vacation weather out of it. But I am rocking my vintage 1996 Meadowlands Final Four for this episode. So today's episode, I said it was one of the more dramatic ones in college basketball history, and it is about the Fab Five. Andy, what's your reference point for the Fab Five?
Queer Eye for the Straight Guy.
Okay.
I know of 2 Fab Fives, which was the first Queer Eye for the Straight Guy Fab Five, and then the current Queer Eye Fab Five. That is what that means to me. Otherwise,
I figured that might be your Fab Five reference point for those who
obviously.
don't know what you're talking about, because they come from more of a sports background. What are you talking about?
Queer Eye for the Straight Guy is an incredible reality show. I don't remember the year that it first started. I do remember that I think I must have been in middle school.
Yeah, it's been around.
So we're talking probably like, I don't know, 2002 would be my guess. I guess I'm literally sitting in front of a laptop, but let's just say it's 2002. Early in its inception, it would just be some schlubby guy who I guess his like friends and family nominated him for it. And they would come in and sort of revamp his life through a gay, queer lens. And honestly, the thing that's so great about the show then and now, it also like really gets to the heart, because what these men effectively do is like change someone's life and help like get them out of whatever rut they're in. Mm-hmm. And it's a really special show. I love it.
Yeah, I've seen a few, definitely, especially the newer ones.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's not the Fab Five we're talking about today. So if that's your reference point, then you're in for an exciting story today. But the Fab Five that I'm going to talk about, this is exciting because if you don't know anything about it, this is like part of the lore of college basketball that I grew up with.
Oh, I'm thrilled.
So it's one of the like big stories or topics of college basketball that like everyone would know if they've paid attention to it. And like if they're into March Madness or college basketball history.
So if I find myself at a social event and someone's a real college basketball fan, I'm going to have something
You'll
to
be like,
say.
the Fab Five. And then they'll be like, yeah, that's something I know.
That's about how it goes usually when I'm like, that's right. You're from Boston, Patriots. And they're like, mm-hmm. And they're like, okay.
So we're going to start this story with a man named Ed Martin. It's going to start sort of ominously.
Okay.
You're not going to know everything. Okay.
Oh, no. I hate that. Okay.
Ed works at Ford Motor Company in Detroit, Michigan as an electrician in the 70s, 80s, his whole life. In order to make some extra money, he gets involved in a numbers game that runs at the Ford facilities. Do you know what a numbers game is?
Sudoku? Is it like gambling?
Yeah.
Okay.
A numbers game is an illegal lottery. It's something like out of The Sopranos or out of like a mafia sort of thing. But it happened in a lot of different cities.
Okay.
And a lot of places.
Okay.
Initially, Ed helped collect bets, but he eventually ended up running the whole operation and made quite a bit of extra money on top of his electrician job, which he was at for a long time, by taking like a percentage of the money on the bets.
Oh, because he was doing the work.
Basically, what Ed Martin was running at the Ford facility was like not the actual state sanctioned lottery, but another like mini lottery.
Yeah. Okay.
And then he was taking a cut of the winnings. So he's doing that on the side while working at Ford. Now, what does this have to do with basketball, right? So
Forgot, yes.
Ed Martin was also a huge basketball fan, and by many accounts, a genuinely nice guy who liked to use his extra money to help local basketball players and their families in the Detroit area.
Oh, that's sweet.
Who like needed financial help.
I love that. That's very Robin Hood.
Yes. So starting in the early 1980s, Martin formed a relationship with basketball coach Perry Watson at Southwestern High School in Detroit. And as part of their friendship, Martin gave some of his players and their families money for meals, clothing, and other necessities.
That's awesome.
You know, it might have been from his salary, might have been from this numbers game, but who really knows?
Okay.
When it came time for some of the better players from this high school, Southwestern, to be recruited by colleges, Martin's presence was also felt. Being from Detroit, Martin had a love for Michigan University basketball, Michigan area. And through his involvement with Michigan high school recruits, he began to form a relationship with the then Michigan head basketball coach, Bill Frieder.
Okay.
So he's starting to get buddy-buddy with people within the Michigan program through some of his connections with the younger high school students that are being recruited by colleges and by Michigan, especially coming out of Detroit. Ed's son said this was because his dad always wanted to be involved in basketball and be relevant in that world, but he was an electrician without really any of those connections. He always wanted to coach or scout or something, but this was his way to gain some influence with talented basketball players and Michigan basketball by like being a booster or under the table sort of helper.
Sure. And this is, I feel like I don't want to predict what's happening here, but I know that it is illegal for recruiters from colleges and universities to like offer any sort of like financial incentive for players to be recruited.
At this time, yeah.
So I'm just surmising that old Ed with his numbers money is a nice little loophole to that.
It's nice. It's also definitely illegal.
Yeah, but the money's not coming. It's still illegal, but the money's not coming from the university.
Within the house.
Right. Anyway, that's just my prediction.
Nope. No, that's a good observation. Ed thought that maybe he would get some sort of kickback or at least relevance with players that he helped when they were younger. Like, hey, don't forget me when you're famous.
Sure.
But he did genuinely want to help them then.
Yeah, of course.
In the late 1980s, Ed's influence in the basketball world of Detroit and Michigan in general was growing when he became aware of the best young talent to come through Detroit in quite some time, maybe ever. That player was middle school aged Chris Webber. Webber was a tall, skilled forward that would become the #1 college recruit in his class in the country. And after seeing Webber play in middle school, Martin started to go to more of his games and befriended Webber and his family.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't recognize the name, but that doesn't mean anything because it's me.
Chris Webber he's a huge basketball name.
In the NBA?
Yeah, eventually.
This is like when you said Tim Duncan, and I was like, who?
Oh, yeah. So in 1989, Bill Frieder left Michigan, and a new head coach by the name of Steve Fisher became the leader of the Maize and Blue. As you might expect, Martin instantly became friendly with Fisher, again through his connections with potential Michigan players and people in the Detroit area. And here's where we'll leave Ed Martin for now. But just know that he's around during all of what's to come.
Okay.
And his involvement with Michigan basketball as sort of a booster and under-the-table financier is like a thing known in the Detroit area and at Michigan. So in 1989, Michigan won the national championship with Steve Fisher.
I was also born.
Yes. But the future of Michigan basketball was up in the air after that because they lost a bunch of their talent to the NBA. Players like Glenn Rice and Ramil Robinson were gone, and Michigan needed some new players to start building a team again.
Was this so like people, because people don't go all the way through?
Well, I think
they did
in this case, they did a lot more, and a lot of those players were just seniors or juniors or older.
Okay.
And they went to the NBA.
Gotcha.
But instead of recruiting guys that would develop over 4 years into winning players, the classic college basketball style that like my grandpa likes.
Sure does.
But, you know, I kind of get it because you want to know those guys when they're in college a little bit. Now they all leave really early.
And then from my perspective of someone who just loved college and loves academia, I'm like, yeah, let them stay 4 years. It's the best.
But anyway, they didn't do that this time, and they took a new approach by going after a really strong freshman recruiting class.
Okay.
Like any major school, Michigan had been recruiting the best players from around the country in hopes to land a few of the top recruits. But what they pulled off was historic for the time. According to the 30 for 30 doc, which I'll reference quite a bit throughout this, called the Fab Five, it's one of the best ones. So go watch that if you haven't seen it yet, because it's a good companion piece to what we're doing here. According to the 30 for 30 doc, a 6'9" forward named Juwan Howard signed on with Michigan first in that class. So head coach Steve Fisher and his assistant Brian Dutcher flew to Juwan's grandmother's funeral in Chicago, who he was really close with during his recruiting process. The act of kindness, or cynically the recruiting tactic, worked, and Juwan was signed on as the 4th ranked recruit in the country from that class.
It does feel a little bit like there's an ulterior motive, obviously.
Whenever I see that stuff, because it happens in all college sports, you kind of hear stories of the coaches showed up and was such a nice guy in my hometown or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm always a little like, I know what they're doing. Everyone knows what they're doing.
Everybody knows what they're doing. You can totally see the machination behind it. But I mean, it's still a nice thing to do. But
Next up was Jimmy King, a guard from Texas who signed with Michigan mostly because Juwan had. And then Ray Jackson also followed suit, signing with Michigan because of Howard and King. So they had like their big 3. Next, they recruited Jalen Rose, also from Detroit.
I know Jalen Rose.
You know Jalen Rose. I was curious to see your reaction to hearing
I'm personal friends with Jalen Rose. I know Jalen.
I know
Rose.
Jalen.
Jalen.
Yeah. So next they recruited Jalen Rose, also from Detroit. Jalen's dad was named Jimmy Walker, and he was a pro basketball player, but Jalen never had a relationship with him. Jalen did have a relationship with Ed Martin because he was also from Detroit, so he knew Ed. Rose went to public school in Detroit, while another athlete across town, Chris Webber, was at private school. Yes, and they all knew of each other at the time because it's Detroit. So they recruited Jalen Rose and Chris Webber, who were like way high in the recruiting class. And they both agreed to go to Michigan, along with Juwan Howard, Ray Jackson, and Jimmy King.
And at the time, was Michigan not one of the schools that like all the best people would want to go to?
So I think the all the best people thing wasn't even really happening as much as it does now.
I see.
Like people all getting together and going to one place didn't happen that much. So this was like historic. People would go to Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, UConn, these big name blue blood schools, and they were all looking at a lot of these same players.
Okay.
So they were competing for Chris Webber,
gotcha,
Jalen Rose, and stuff like that with pretty big name schools.
Yeah, because I know that historically there are schools like Kentucky or Duke where like that is they have a lot of recruiting power because they tend to win or get to the Final Four or whatever.
Michigan did win in 1989, so they were coming off
that
with quite a bit of clout, I guess. But it was still historic to get all these guys. And a lot of the reason why, according to the doc and stuff I was reading, is because they recruited each other. Like once you get Juwan Howard, he's like telling you, hey, come here, we'll win.
Well, yeah, because they want to play with other good people that they like. Yeah.
And also because of what we're talking about, you wanted to actually have a better college team at the time that really proved something because you weren't just going right to the NBA out of high school.
Right.
So if you could assemble a good team in college, I assume they thought then they would be more well-known for NBA success. So Michigan ended up recruiting the 1st, 4th, 9th, 11th, and 46th available player from that class in those 5 guys. Chris Webber from Detroit Country Day, Juwan Howard from Chicago Vocational, Jalen Rose from Southwestern in Detroit, Jimmy King from Plano, Texas, and Ray Jackson from Austin, Texas. So the Fab Five are freshmen in the fall of 1991. All 5 new recruits showed up at Michigan and brought with them the style and sound of black culture at the time. This meant rap music, baggy clothes, and all the things that old white guys were afraid of, deathly afraid of at the time. I'm going to play you a little clip from the 30 for 30 with a discussion of the vibe when they showed up on campus.
In the early 90s, another revolution was afoot. Hip-hop's street-born style was permeating pop culture. Whether it was hats, pants, chains, or clocks, bigger was better. Baggy was in, but college basketball lagged behind.
Look at these teeny
Before the
shorts.
Fab Five,
Ice Cube.
you know, dudes was wearing panties out there playing.
Anybody were to look back and look at the shorts that anybody wore in 1988 or 89, they'd be viewed as obscene now.
We had those hip huggers from the old days that looked like
scandalous.
Speedos now.
For me personally, shorts was always an issue. The first day we got uniforms, I did exactly what I tried to do in high school, is to get the biggest pair of shorts. I picked out a nice big pair. But the problem was they were for Chip Armour. They had number 43 in it. So when Chip showed up that day, I asked him. And God bless him, he was cool with it.
Jalen initiated the baggy
Ray
shorts.
Jackson.
We were tired of the little shorts. So we went to coach one day after practice, and we said, Fish, look, we need to be comfortable.
We can't have those shorts
And
you
Juwan
see
Howard.
in Utah with John Stockton, Karl Malone, and we don't want to look like that. We like the shorts like how Michael Jordan wear with the Bulls, but longer.
Bottom line, it came down to coach. He said, if y'all decide to go with these baggy shorts and y'all promise y'all will win me games, then I'll do it.
That is so interesting that the shorts were such
an issue.
Such a thing. I mean, I understand it being an issue for the players in the sense that like they want to be comfortable while they're playing. It's just, it's so funny in like sports, and especially like from what I have seen of college sports. College sports is really up its own ass about like tradition and, you know, what we've historically done in the past, and we have a certain look and like whatever. So I appreciate that those guys, because they were young, they were probably only like 18 or 19, and they were like, we cannot play in these.
Yeah. Hey, we're not going to be able to perform.
Well, and they know they have influence because they know that they were like top recruits. So I love that.
And I wanted to play you a little bit here just for like tone and vibe of the Fab Five, a clip from an interview when they showed up on campus of just all of them sitting down and just sort of doing the like people's interview where they're like, get to know you type thing. So I'm going to play a little bit of that. It kind of goes all over the place, but you do get a sense of like their personalities.
Okay.
Who's the most intense? Who's the most competitive of the 5 of you? Anybody?
Oh my God, they're so young.
Who's the most competitive? Juwan, are you? Are you the most competitive?
Well, we always going at it, I feel them muscling me and I'm muscling them back, I might not let them dunk on me, but we might do it, so, I just try to be competitive with them.
So the friendship stops when you walk across the white line, huh? It becomes a competitive thing, and then you're friends again when you walk back off the floor?
We still friends on the court.
Friends on the court.
Yeah, we pack each other on the back.
Push each other and make each other better.
All right, let me ask you this. Who gets up the highest? Who's got the best vertical?
Probably one of them two. Jimmy.
One of these Texas guys.
One of the Texas guys. They're good dunkers.
Yeah. What did you say, Jay?
We all dunk the ball, you know. It's just maybe like one game, somebody might have more dunks than the other, so we label him the dunk. You know.
I mean, you had no other game but to dunk.
You ain't got no jump shot or nothing.
Oh my God, they're such little cuties.
Yeah, and they're just clearly like kind of nervous.
They are, and the interviewer is like not letting up. Like they're clearly like, we've said all we kind of want to say about this, and the interviewer's like, and which one of you eats the most food?
Which one of you jumps the highest? Oh, God. It's like instead of just asking them about like actual basketball, they're just asking. But I did really like how they call each other the dunker.
Yeah.
And it means like that's all you can do is dunk. You don't have any other game. So they're like, you're a dunker.
Basketball trash talk is so good and funny and specific to the point of being so hurtful sometimes.
Jalen was as entertaining a basketball player as you ever saw. One of the great trash talkers of all time.
Trash talking was 100% a part of who I was on every level. I understood that the mental aspect of the game was just as important as the physical. I would do research on people and say nasty things to them based on that research.
That's amazing.
I was a student of trash talking. If I found out your mom's name or something crazy that happened to someone in your family or something that happened bad to you, I'm trying to intimidate you. I'm trying to have you upset.
I mean, we had officials stepping in, telling us we couldn't talk smack.
Come here. There won't be any more talking. That's it. We've told you, no more talking. If you worry about the talking.
And the majority of the smack talking, let me be honest, was motivation for one another.
I grew up playing sports in a black culture. Talking trash was heralded, acknowledged, and appreciated. Trash talking in sports originally from the playgrounds was never about getting in your face. It was about getting in your head. And that's what these kids were doing. When they talked trash, they were getting in your head. But it got distorted by people who weren't really that familiar with what they were saying.
Jalen Rose doing research
for smack talk
is the greatest thing I have ever heard, because once again, we're talking about a time where it's not like he could just get on a laptop and like Google that person. He had to like spend some time, I would imagine. And I think that's so funny. Can you imagine like you're on the basketball court and you're like, 20 years old and Jalen Rose is like, your grandma, insert her actual name, is ugly, or like whatever. You would be so startled.
Yeah. Michigan and the Fab Five had an early game against Duke, the defending national champions, where Michigan stayed competitive and lost at the last second. And it sort of put them on the map and validated them as a team, because they're all these young players and everyone in the news and stuff like that is like, no way it works.
Yeah.
They're all too young. Duke is too good. Duke's the best team. And they almost beat Duke with mostly that lineup. And so everyone was like, oh, shit. Like, they're actually pretty good. The first time all five freshmen started, it just wasn't something that you did at the time. Like, even today, that's rare, but probably for different reasons. Then it was more of like an experience and tradition thing. Like, oh, you don't start five freshmen because, like you were saying, college basketball awards seniors for their loyalty to the program and all that kind of stuff, which goes out the window when you actually want to win. And in this case, they had all five freshmen and they were expected to be bad and unpolished, and they weren't. Nowadays, it'd probably be more of a talent thing, because you wouldn't have five freshmen that are five of the top, 40 recruits in the country all in one place. They'd be, some of them be in the NBA or like Overtime Elite or one of these other programs for talent. I did want to play one little clip of just the Fab Five playing together, and this was an early game.
Celebrates his own dunk. Look at it.
He celebrates his own dunk. Was seen as such a crazy thing.
Raise alley-oop. Does he do anything else besides dunk?
I love an alley-oop.
Does he do anything else besides dunk?
Oh my God.
Like, they're just like chiding him.
Keep behind his back and see you
This is like NBA style play in a college game.
Before it was really seen.
Wow.
What we always do. We dunk it.
See, they're like making fun of them for dunking.
Yeah, they're like being very patronizing.
You know what? A lot of people look and say, hey, you're hot dog, and they got the steal.
Rose with the steal. He's looking for the break. But Eastern Michigan gets back on defense, and Rose takes it all the way. And gets it himself!
Jalen Rose take it all the
Was
way
no one
down the middle.
dunking in college basketball?
It doesn't seem like it's that weird of a thing.
Watch it again. Michael Jordan has the tongue. Jalen Rose has the O.
I've never seen Jalen Rose play basketball. I've only seen him as an announcer.
I remember his dad jumping that well. Eastern Michigan, good cut. Look at Tally.
3-on-2 to Jimmy King. Steal.
Wow. I mean, this is a lot of dunking.
Yeah.
They're kind of showing off a
little bit. They're showing off, but like it's funny how they're dominating a basketball game and the announcers are finding a way to try to like
belittle
say
them.
That they're doing it the wrong way. They're doing it in this like crazy black way.
Yeah,
know?
There's definitely an undertone of
it's
racism.
It's kind of
when the
crazy.
white guy's like, "Oh my God, they just can't stop dunking." It's like, oh my God, chill out.
So because of this, guys who aren't that guy like it, which is most of the rest of the country, are like, this is amazing. I'm a big fan. The Fab Five don't have the nickname of the Fab Five yet, but as they got more popular and they start dunking on everybody, that name starts to get floated around.
Mm-hmm.
And initially they didn't like it because they were like, someone else is naming us this. We don't want to be called that. And they tried to change their nickname publicly to 5 times or 5X, but it didn't take off. I'm going to have you read a little article from the Tampa Bay Times about that.
Phi on Fab Five. Michigan freshmen hate nickname. You can call them talented. You can call them precocious. You can even call them to dinner. Just quit calling them the Fab Five. Hailed as the greatest recruiting class ever assembled, freshmen Jalen Rose, Chris Webber, Jimmy King, Juwan Howard, and Ray Jackson have led Michigan to an 8-1 record and a number 11 ranking. The name Fab Five seems to fit, but they'd rather not wear it. They are, and so am I, tired of hearing them called Fab Five, said Michigan coach Steve Fisher, whose youngsters get their first taste of Big Ten competition at Iowa tonight. The players have come up with their own nickname, 5 times, or as they prefer it, 5 X's. Quote, it means 5 times 1, said Rose, a 6'8" guard who leads the team with an 18.7 scoring average. Quote, we all sat around and thought about it because we were tired of being the Fab Five.
So they try to change their name. It doesn't stick.
Yeah, it's not as catchy as the Fab Five. I do like the idea of their name, though, of like 5 times 1, because they do, even in that interview, they all were kind of like, even though like when they get on the court individually, they are perfectly comfortable with like dunking and doing showier stuff. It seemed like in the locker room, they really do like each other and get along and play well together. So I like the idea that like collaboratively as a group, they were like, let's just be like 5 players as one.
5 times 1, yeah.
I think it's cute.
No, it is cute. So as you kind of alluded to, the traditionalist, racist backlash to the Fab Five was definitely a thing. Yeah, Michigan fans even wrote horrible hate mail to the team and players.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, not wanting to see like young black men be the face of their school and their sports. I'm going to play a clip again from the 30 for 30 doc that sort of addresses this better than I can.
You got 5 black kids from the inner city who is at a university who prides themselves on being very traditional, and we weren't traditional. We got nasty letters from alumni in Michigan because of that.
I had many letters that were very racist in tone and made reference to 5 guys.
Oh my God.
Using the N-word more than once and proudly saying that they were Michigan graduates.
These are from people who went there and cared a lot about their school.
Oh my God.
And felt like they needed to voice their opinion, and they voiced their opinion.
Ugh.
This is not, the Michigan way.
Oh my God.
They were hate-filled, evil almost the devil's work.
I think those things made us come together as a team. People trying to break us down from every angle, you know, that brought us together.
Wow, so, that sucks. That was very difficult to watch.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I didn't really think about it when I learned about them.
Yeah.
As a kid.
Yeah.
Of course, the Fab Five weren't the first or only group of black players who were victims of racism in basketball. In fact, in the late 70s and early 80s, Georgetown University, under the leadership of Coach John Thompson, took on a lot of the same challenges. John Thompson led players like Patrick Ewing, Allen Iverson, Alonzo Mourning, and Dikembe Mutombo at Georgetown. When he became the first black coach to win an NCAA title in 1984, here's what he had to say after an annoying white reporter was asking him questions.
Significance being the first black coach?
I'm not interested in being the first or only black doing anything because it implies that in 1984, a black man finally became intelligent enough to win the NCAA title, and that's a very misleading thing.
Basically, overall, even though we are in the 80s and the 90s, racism is still alive and well. And guess what? Still is.
Yeah. Back in 1991, the 92 final, because they like overlap years, Michigan's Fab Five lineup made it all the way to the championship game.
Nice.
And I want to play you a little clip of all of them involved in a play during that game.
Good ball handling by Howard, and dishes on the baseline. Weber missing. Oh. Rose follows.
Yeah.
No block out on the wing by Bobby Hurley. Back screen that time. Howard almost had it.
Jimmy King back in the iron. Weber up high to save it home.
You get to hear all the names and see all the people playing together.
They're just so good. Both instances when they made the shot, it was somebody like got the rebound and put it in. They're going to be available and ready to like back that person up in case something goes wrong.
Yeah, they're active on the glass.
Is that it?
It's just like actively rebounding.
Active on the glass?
On the glass.
Oh, on the glass.
On the boards.
Active on the glass while they're in the paint.
Yeah. Anyway, they, like I said, lost to Duke and Christian Laettner in that game. It was still a triumph for them to make it all the way there. And
this is their freshman year?
Yeah, freshman year.
That's so wild.
The game is over. The Duke of Destiny has won it. For the first time in 2 decades, college basketball has a repeat champion.
Well, they're only freshmen.
Only freshmen.
They got 3 more times.
Yep.
They could do this.
Now that they weren't freshmen anymore, they had earned more of a reputation for being good, but also for being new and flashy and thuggish. Basically, the racism ramped up during their sophomore year because now everyone knew who they were. They were way more famous and culturally relevant, and Michigan leaned into this by selling everything Fab Five related that they could at their campus stores and everywhere. This annoyed all of the Fab Five, particularly Chris Webber, who was the star player. They all started thinking about making some of the money that their fame brought to Michigan, which, is a topic that we'll continue to talk about in this episode and,
for the rest
they've
of
talked
time.
about up till today. They started wearing plain blue shirts instead of Michigan merch as a statement against the capitalist machine of Michigan.
Yes.
They were also known for wearing black socks for the first time. No one wore black socks on a basketball court.
Really?
And they wore these like black Nike, short or long black socks. And that was like seen as like, oh my God, black socks, baggy shorts.
It takes so little to make white people angry.
Oh my God, it's a different color sock.
Smallest thing will make a white person like clutch their pearls and be like, I have different socks than I'm used to.
And it's not like they were lobsters on the socks.
Even if they were, it's socks.
It was just black socks. I want to play another clip from the doc about this.
When we started to realize that everything we wore, people were selling, we started to protest. And one of our silent protests was wear plain blue shirts that didn't say Michigan, that didn't say Nike, that didn't say anything.
That's so badass.
Yeah.
That was our silent protest.
A year after the Wolverines won their only title in 1989, merchandise royalties totaled $1.6 million. Following the Fab Five's freshman season, that number would climb to a 2-year total of $10.5 million.
Yeah.
It was amateur athletics, but business was booming for everyone except the Fab Five themselves.
Perception of our lifestyle, that we were living like rock stars. We weren't living that lifestyle. That just wasn't what it was. We were eating cereal some night, you know, cooking hot dogs. That was our lifestyle. We lived just like every college student.
The only perks that we really got were pooling our money together to go to Taco Bell. They recognized who we were and gave us more tacos.
Yeah, we played beer pong. Yeah, we went to frat houses. Yeah, we went to parties. Yeah, we were doing what all of the other college kids were doing. It just so happened that we had to go to practice the next day.
You know, this is something I've talked about with you, especially during March Madness, because during the tournament, I'm always like, don't they have school? Are they on spring break? Do they have to turn in assignments? Like, what's going on?
You're always thinking about that.
I know, because I'm always thinking about like my college experience where I was like, I mean, I was a theater major, so like, let's be real. But like, I don't know. I'm just always being like, they're away from.
How are they going to get to their bio lab?
Yeah, exactly.
Despite all of that, they made another run, and this time as a number 1 seed in the tournament.
Hell yeah.
Here is the end of overtime in the Final Four game against Kentucky.
Chris Webber thinks he can take Martinez. He wants it. Yep, gets it. He drives, scores. Michigan has taken the lead.
So with that win, Michigan made it to the national championship game for a second year in a row. In the national championship game, the Fab Five played better than they did a year before against Duke. And with 20 seconds left in the game, Michigan was down by 2 points with a UNC player at the free throw line. And now I'm going to play for you a clip that might be one of the most dramatic clips in college basketball history.
This is intense.
So he misses.
A 2 to tie.
Webber gets
Michigan will have to bring it.
He travels and they don't call it. He dribbles down the court.
Into the front court. They have no timeouts remaining.
He causes too many timeouts. That's a technical foul.
And he calls a timeout when they don't have any.
Weber called a timeout?
Weber called a timeout for Michigan. Michigan has no timeouts. The result of that is a technical foul, and you lose the ball. Because if you call a timeout on the court and you don't have any, your team gets a technical foul. That's just in the rules.
Why did he call it?
He called it because people on the sidelines, or he somehow got it in his head that he had one, and they rushed down the court, going to call a timeout, gather themselves with 10 seconds left, and get a final shot to win the game.
Gotcha.
He wasn't thinking, or he was distracted, or somebody told him on the sideline to do it. He did it. They lose the game, lose the national championship. The most like key moment in the most key game of all time.
That's heartbreaking.
And Chris Webber.
That's something I would do.
Call the timeout. And this, we have to play it, but it's heartbreaking, is Webber after the game.
Oh.
Was anyone telling you to call the timeout? Or did you hear the call a timeout at that point? It seemed like you looked a little confused when you looked at the guys on the bench.
I don't remember. Chris, not to belabor the point, but what was going through your mind when it happened?
It was 20 seconds left, and I started dribbling the ball. Went down by 2. Get on our side of the court. I picked up my dribble. Called the timeout. That was, whatever I did, that's what was going through my head. And it probably cost our team the game.
Chris, you said on Sunday that the loss to Duke last year was the lowest moment of your life. Is this worse?
Oh, my God.
It's the exact same.
Oh, my God. Leave him alone.
Yeah.
I hate post-game interviews with the people who lose. I cannot get into the headspace of someone who has like the gall to look at someone who is like really going through it and just wants to leave and is like,
not to belabor the point, but
you said last year that that was the worst moment of your life. Are you feeling even shittier now?
This one has to be worse, right?
Oh my God.
So after the 2 losses in the NCAA title, everyone kind of knew that the Fab Five was coming to an end. Someone was going to leave for the NBA soon. It was kind of assumed.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris Webber was the first one to do that in the very next draft.
That makes me happy because he had this crushing moment.
So I'm going to play for you Chris Webber being drafted. Actually, this is the trade that happened. So Chris Webber was drafted number 1 overall in '93 by the Magic. And on draft night, he was traded. And they sometimes do that.
You can do that.
Yeah, you can do that.
Huh.
And this is one of the really dramatic moments of draft history.
Everything about this group of people is very dramatic.
Yeah. This is Commissioner at the time, David Stern, at the draft podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to report a trade. Orlando has traded the draft rights to Chris Webber to Golden State.
Oh my God.
In exchange for the draft rights to Anthony Hardaway and 3 future first-round draft picks.
It's so dramatic.
Which will be exercised at the earliest in the years 1996, 1998, and 2000.
Wow, David Stern really letting it just
Letting the space sit. So the reason why it was so loud was because that draft was at the Palace of Auburn Hills in Detroit. So they had a special interest in what happened to Webber in that draft.
Okay, so just to clear this up for me, the Orlando Magic had the first draft pick and they drafted Chris Webber.
Yes.
And then later on in the evening, phone calls were made.
They wanted Penny Hardaway, who ended up playing for the Magic with Shaq and that whole crazy 90s.
Yes.
And so they traded players and way more picks because Webber was better.
Yeah.
So, or recruited as a higher thing.
Trading and like drafting in sports is one of these areas where like, I don't know how anybody keeps up with this because you're trading like in 1996, which is not this year, you can have a top draft pick. And then in 1999, which again, not this year.
Oh my God. The Oklahoma City Thunder are like notorious for this. Well, a lot of teams now, but they have accumulated tons and tons and tons of draft picks. And that's like how they have rebuilt their team to being really good this year and getting better. But going back, they've accumulated picks for 2028 and they're trading picks for 2030. It's like you don't even know if the world's going to exist, much less
probably not, honestly.
less a first round draft choice.
Who keeps track of all of that? There must be just some like crazy spreadsheet. I don't know.
So Chris Webber was drafted in 93. And then after the next year, Jalen and Juwan leave Michigan. And this is Jalen Rose's draft night suit, which got a lot of attention at the time.
Oh, the fashion at the NBA draft is amazing.
So let's go to David Stern and find out what the Nuggets do with the draft of 94.
With the 13th pick in the 1994 NBA draft, the Denver Nuggets select Jalen Rose from the University of Michigan.
Jalen Rose with his mother and grandmother, and we saw at lunch today, Jalen Rose, I think, wins the Styling Award with that red pinstripe. No question about it. Grant Hill was one of the contenders for the fashion dress, but Jalen Rose.
This is such a great 90s basketball draft look.
Yeah. And then that same draft, Juwan Howard was picked.
The Washington Bullets select Juwan Howard from the University of Michigan.
So no surprises so far for the first 5 selections. Juwan Howard. He's 21 years old, played his high school basketball at Chicago Vocational. Steve Fisher, his coach, and the man who recruited the Fab Five at Michigan, and they are going fast.
I love the look of them with their new team hat and their like beautiful suits.
Yeah.
It's a fun time. Also, I'm just putting a pin in this. When inevitably someone needs to play David Stern in a movie or a TV show, maybe it's already happened, I think John Lovitz is good casting.
Okay. John Lovitz. All right.
Yeah.
In the next few years, Rose, Howard, and Webber all begin to develop NBA careers. And Michigan basketball has moved on from the Fab Five era.
I'm happy for all of them, but it makes me sad that they're not going to be able to all play on the same team together.
Yeah, it is kind of sad. It's like a good thing has to come to an end. Like you said at the top, you're like, oh, and we get to see them for 3 more years after their freshman year. And I'm like, unfortunately,
quite.
That's just like not what happens.
But the friendships They made along the way, hopefully have lasted a lifetime. Hopefully they all still like each other.
So, like I said, Rose, Howard, Weber, they're all in the NBA. The other guys were less highly coveted, but they also had their own basketball careers. We'll get to that at the end.
Okay.
But then there's a car accident.
Oh.
February of 1996 with the then current Michigan players and recruits.
Oh.
So not the Fab Five anymore, but Steve Fisher's new team.
Michigan basketball players involved in car accident. 5 Michigan basketball players and a recruit all escaped serious injury early Saturday when their vehicle rolled over while returning from a party in Detroit. The players were Maurice Taylor, Willie Mitchell, Robert Traylor, Lewis Bullock, all starters, and Ron Oliver. The recruit was Mateen Cleaves, a 6'2" guard who led Flint Northern to the Class A state championship last season. The most serious injury was Traylor's broken right arm. The 320-pound freshman will miss the rest of the season.
So this car accident at Michigan happens with some of the Michigan players at the time. I remember Robert Traylor because he was huge, 320-pound center, and very fun to watch play.
So I'm assuming he recovered.
He did recover, but he was out for that year. Mateen Cleaves, the guy in the car who they were recruiting, actually went to Michigan State and became a star there. So he didn't end up going to Michigan.
Do you think the car accident had anything to do with it?
So,
I'm glad everyone was okay.
Yeah, investigators revealed that the car ride that they were on was part of a recruiting visit for Mateen Cleaves, as they mentioned in that article. The players were showing him a good time, going out for a night when the car rolled over, injuring Traylor, who would not be able to play that year. But thankfully, everyone else was all right.
Okay.
But one of their stops on that night was to the house of someone friendly with Michigan basketball named Ed Martin.
Oh my God, he's back.
Some accounts say that the party was at Martin's. Some say that it was just a stop along the way.
Okay.
But when they stopped at Martin's, he allegedly gave the players pocket money, spending money for that night out. This got people looking into Ed Martin more closely because his name was thrown around with that evening as they looked into, okay, why were they rolling over their car?
Yeah.
What were they doing that night? They found out that they'd stopped at Ed Martin's. And so they looked in, okay, what's the deal with Ed Martin? Why is he spending time with Michigan basketball players and recruits? So in 1997, the Detroit Free Press reported on what you already know from the beginning of this episode, which is Ed Martin was involved in that evening because he was befriending young basketball players in the Detroit area, helping them out. Now, here's how this all connects. If you recall from the beginning of our story, Chris Webber and Jalen Rose were both from Detroit, and they were high school basketball stars there, and they knew Ed Martin. As Ed Martin's story got out and his web of high-profile basketball connections began to be exposed, everyone involved came under fire.
Oh.
After all of Ed Martin's under-the-table money and assistance was technically illegal in high school and especially in college sports. So investigators started to unravel it all.
Oh, God.
This meant everyone found out that the Fab Five a few years ago were also involved with Ed Martin. Jalen, Chris, Jawan, Ray, and Jimmy were now being questioned as well about their involvement. The authorities were investigating Martin's alleged numbers game operation at the Ford plants when they came across allegations that he'd been providing basketball players with money and gifts. In the course of the federal investigation, evidence turned up that Martin had given cash payments and other benefits to several Michigan players and Detroit area high school prospects starting as early as 1980 or in the 80s. As a result of the investigations, in May 99, a federal grand jury subpoenaed several of the Michigan basketball players to investigate their relationship between Martin and Michigan basketball. It turned out that between 1988 and 1993, Martin gave Chris Webber about $280,000.
Oh, wow.
In court, Webber denied his relationship with Martin, which got Webber into more trouble because he was lying in court and perjured himself. As a result of this investigation, Steve Fisher was fired in 1997 for failing to shut down this gift giving with knowledge of it. They were able to prove that Steve Fisher knew what was happening. I'm going to play you a clip from the 30 for 30 Fab Five doc now about Ed Martin and the Fab Five talking about him.
Chris Webber has been indicted on charges he lied to a grand jury about his dealings with a Michigan booster.
Webber allegedly lied about receiving $280,000 worth of cash and gifts from booster Ed Martin during his 2-year college career.
When I first started recruiting for Michigan, I went to a public league game in Detroit, and at the end of the game, the players I'm watching, they're out on the court with an older gentleman that's celebrating with them. What was Ed Martin?
The Godfather, Big Money Ed, as we called him. He was a big fan of Southwestern's program. So if there was a player on the team that had busted gym shoes or didn't have boots in the winter, Big Money Ed would make sure that he had a pair of shoes. The biggest misconception was that Ed only looked out for the players that were the stars. Ed looked out for all of the kids, and a couple of us became stars.
In cities like Detroit, when you're raised like a lot of these kids in our city have to be, you're not worried about breaking NCAA rules in the future. You're worried about eating now. You're worried about how you're going to drive now, what you're going to wear now. Do you have shoes? Do you have something nice to wear if you're going on a date? And you don't care where it comes from. And if somebody says, well, just remember me when you go to the NBA. All right, yeah, sure, okay, I will. Thanks for the sneakers. Thanks for the coat. Thanks for the cake. Thanks for the $100 for my birthday.
But Martin was assisting players with money earned from an illegal gambling ring he operated. He was also investing additional money in some of the better players, with the expectation they would return the investment if they reached the NBA. Among them, Chris Webber.
Now, what happened between Ed Martin and Chris Webber to this day remains a mystery because Chris won't talk about it and Ed Martin's dead. But what you had the record of before Ed Martin died and what you've heard from other people around him was that he gave Chris a significant amount of money in exchange for, I guess, a promise that once Chris went pro, he'd repay him in some way or keep him in his inner circle or make him something or another.
I don't see anything that's like all that insidious about this.
Yeah.
These are kids. There's a guy who has money. Whatever, he made it illegally. That's his business. But like, these are kids who have needs.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be helpful to like the youth in his area, and he liked basketball. Like, he knew it was wrong probably, and people at Michigan knew it was wrong probably, but like I understand that it is against NCAA rules, but some of the most talented players come from circumstances where they don't have enough money for the things that they need or whatever. And if the actual program that they are entering is not going to provide for them in any way until when did college athletes?
Just a couple years ago.
Yeah, and they're not even getting paid by the NCAA.
Or their school.
They're allowed to take like ad money.
They're allowed to take like there's
sponsorships.
Boosters can sort of pay them now. Essentially what Ed Martin was doing is pretty much legal now.
Right.
Through charitable organizations they set up in order to pay players now.
Yeah.
I think in the era of NIL, this is all going to get worked out where schools just pay salaries to players eventually.
They should.
It's going to get bargained out.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're doing now. Like, what are we doing here?
I guess it's the kind of thing where it's like, I know that it wasn't wrong. It wasn't right for Chris Webber to like perjure himself. Obviously, it's not right to like earn money through illegal means, whatever. Technically, this is all illegal, but I'm also just like, can't you guys just let it go? Like, it happened a few years ago. These people are like NBA players now. They were clearly good at basketball and still are. So like, just let it go.
Yeah,
Don't.
Unfortunately, they can't let it go.
No, I know. And SportsCenter, it was funny seeing a couple clips from SportsCenter because I was like, I guess sports news was the same as it is now, where there just isn't enough to cover a 24-hour cycle. So they're just talking about the same stuff over and over again.
So in September of 2002, Webber was indicted on 5 charges, including obstruction of justice and lying to a federal grand jury for having misrepresented his relationship with Martin. As they mentioned in that clip, Ed Martin died suddenly in 2003. And that's when the whole investigation sort of lost steam. Martin's death took the air out of the perjury case. So Webber pleaded guilty to the reduced charge of criminal contempt in order to avoid jail. And he admitted to having received like $38,000, but not the full $280,000. A little bit more on Ed Martin before we wrap up that part of the story. Andy, I wanted to have you read from an article in the Detroit Free Press that was guest written by Ed's son.
Okay.
And I think it provides good context into what was going on with Ed and how he acted as sort of a father figure in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And though he was doing technically illegal things, he was really doing it with a positive,
good intention.
Yeah.
The FBI had received federal subpoenas to tap our telephone calls. Then, one taped conversation changed the direction of their investigation. According to Ed, a troubled Robert Traylor called Ed one evening from his UM apartment. Traylor said he was tired, that the university wanted too much from him. He described having to attend a booster function after practice and that he had homework to do, but if he didn't attend, he could lose his scholarship. Ed told the worried Traylor he doubted they would revoke his scholarship. Ed advised him to be honest, tell UM he can't do everything, and, if necessary, he could take his game to Wisconsin, where he would come back and kick Michigan's ass. Traylor said he couldn't transfer anywhere without sitting out a season. Ed, who knew the NCAA rules, said Tractor could transfer if he didn't take a scholarship, and Ed would pay his way elsewhere if necessary. Armed with that financial assurance, Traylor put aside his concerns. That's what Ed wanted to provide for all his guys. Let them know they weren't alone, that they had options as long as he was breathing. He wanted to shield them from life's distractions, to assure them that if their family needed help, if they needed pocket change, he would help. Being young and having to be the man of the house is a reality in many inner city homes. Ed reminded Traylor the job he had to do now was to play ball, focus on academics, and keep his nose clean. Ed made it clear that he would take care of the rest. On another phone call recorded by the FBI, Traylor told my dad that he'd been approached by guys wanting him to fix a game or two. Ed told him in no uncertain terms to never talk to them again.
So yeah, I just wanted to sort of read that from his son as sort of a follow-up to sort of flesh out what Ed was doing in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, like, it on the surface, yeah, it looks weird at first when you don't know more information, where you're like,
because you're like, oh, this older guy's hanging out with
older
kids.
Guys hanging out with younger people, and he's giving them money and giving them gifts and whatever. And, you know, obviously we don't have all of the information, but it kind of seems like he was just a guy who like wanted to do something good for kids who had a lot of potential and maybe didn't have the resources to achieve that full potential. And it's entirely possible that this man's guidance and financial help made it so that we had some of the greatest NBA players of all time.
Yeah.
You know, so this is why I'm glad I said Robin Hood in the beginning. I'm like, that ended up being accurate, because like that is a very Robin Hood spirit of like, I'm going to do this through like technically illegal means, but the thing is, the system that is legal is not set up to benefit everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you going to do?
Yeah. So after all this stuff came out, almost nobody involved with Michigan basketball during the time Ed Martin was around had clean hands. In 2002, Michigan self-imposed sanctions, a thing they like to do. And the NCAA put some of their own on Michigan. Among those things were no postseason play in 2002 and 2003, even though the players that took Martin's money were gone.
Postseason play meaning the tournament?
Yeah. The school vacated the entire like season records of all that time, which is one of the most sort of horrible things to come out of this.
Wait a minute. So they took away
the Final Fours
of the Fab Five teams?
Yeah, the banners, they took them down.
Oh, come on.
They took all the records out of the book, which is the thing they always do in scandals, where they like, we've erased it from the book like it never happened. It's like, it happened.
It happened.
So it's always kind of a funny
like,
way that
Pete
sports...
Rose seems like a real piece of shit now, but like, put his name in a book.
Back.
Who cares?
Yeah. They had
a lot of sports stuff always, like stuff like this, like sports drama, I'm always just kind of like, you guys, who cares?
Yeah. The same day that the sanctions came down, they removed the banners from the stadium that were in the rafters at Michigan.
That's just overkill.
And it's just like, oh my God, we're going to symbolically remove them and everything.
I'm assuming that like people who are on like the coaching staff and in the basketball administration like also got in trouble, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, because I was about to say, I was like, this legal investigation is focusing an awful lot on the players and not on the people who were adults at the time, not 19-year-olds.
Right.
Who knew what was happening.
They were definitely like punished, like Steve Fisher was like kicked out and stuff, but he came back and coached successfully at like a couple different schools.
Okay.
So he ended up being fine. But yeah, it was really only the guys that they found out they took money that they like really went after. So I'm going to do a little Where Are They Now and finish this up here. So Chris Webber had a successful NBA career. He was the Rookie of the Year that year. He got drafted and then traded to Golden State, and a 5-time All-Star during his time. He went on to have a career in broadcasting for a little bit.
Oh, nice.
And in 2021, Webber announced the launch of a private equity fund investing in minority-owned cannabis businesses.
Love that.
In
Love
2022, he announced the launch of Players Only, a cannabis brand that will feature flower, strains, cartridges, pre-rolls, vapes, and the sort, with like a focus on minority-owned.
So in the last
businesses.
episode, you surprised me with a book that you bought that was relevant. Do you have any goodies?
I wish I could buy it from wherever he was. Probably Michigan. I don't know.
We'll take a trip.
Jalen Rose had a great NBA career, had the most success and impact with the Indiana Pacers from 1996 to 2002. In 2011, it was Jalen's production company that made the Fab Five 30 for 30 doc that we referenced. So he was the one who put that together.
I appreciate that he was like, I'm going to tell this story the accurate way.
Yeah. Rose became a member of ESPN's roster of talent and was on shows all the time. But last year, he was part of that round of layoffs where they got rid of a bunch of on-air talent at ESPN. A little piece of Jalen Goss. He was married to ESPN host Molly Karam in 2018, but they got divorced in 2021. So they like got married because of their time at ESPN.
I don't see why that's like so extra scandalous.
It's just like funny when people from their job get together and then break up, and then it's like kind of a thing on the air.
Yeah.
Like they have to be in the same
weird
realms.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Like on the same shows together sometimes. Oh, that's awkward. That's super awkward. Yeah. Yes, I used to see him on our television quite a bit.
Yes. So Juwan Howard had a long NBA career that ended with winning 2 championships with the Miami Heat in 2012 and 2013. He was like a bench guy. He was like a vibes guy, or a coach on the bench kind of guy at the time. Didn't play much, but
love a vibes guy.
Yeah, he had a huge career with he was good with the Bullets, Wizards, and then played for a bunch of teams. He evolved into a coach with Miami from 2013 when he officially retired to 2019 until this happened. And I'll play you a little press conference with Juwan Howard.
Ladies and gentlemen, our new David and Meredith Kaplan head men's basketball coach for the University of Michigan Wolverines. Please welcome Juwan Howard.
Oh, I love this.
Last time I had a press conference in this building was 1994. I declared that I was going to go to the NBA. Felt like I was letting down my teammates because I didn't do what I came here to do. And that was to bring a championship to this university. A university that I care so much about. I guess you can see that now, huh? Now let's fast forward 25 years later. I'm back.
That is so amazing.
Pretty crazy full circle moment, given all the drama, how they sort of parted ways with the Fab Five and sort of tried to scratch it from their history for so many years.
Oh my God.
And then to hire one of them as the head coach.
Yeah. I was like, if this goes on much longer, I'm going to start crying.
Yeah.
That was so sweet.
So Jimmy King played a couple seasons in the NBA for the Raptors and Denver and played around the world a bit after that. And in 2016, he started coaching for a high school in Michigan.
Nice.
Ray Jackson tried to make the NBA but got cut. He played a little bit in other leagues, but pretty quickly moved back to Austin, Texas, where he started a moving company and an organization called Rise Up to help kids through basketball.
I love that.
Yeah. And Ray Jackson seems to be pretty level-headed about it all in interviews and stuff where he's like doing fine and just kind of got out of basketball quicker. But he took a while to sort of get over that, being one of the only ones out of his 5 friends.
That's gotta be tough. That would require some therapy and self-reflection and self-care.
So lastly here, I want to end with Jalen Rose on ESPN when he was there, talking a little bit about him and the Fab Five and what that would be like in the era of NIL. This was like right when that happened. They talked to him.
NIL.
Name, image, likeness money, which is like what they're calling the ability for players to get paid.
Got it.
Now.
I always felt like the rules of the NCAA represented indentured servitude. And for football players and basketball players, there's always been restrictions. And there still are. As a matter of fact, right after high school, you don't see that in other sports.
Oh, wow, this clip.
You don't see it in golf or tennis
in
or race car driving. You don't see those restrictions. They try to make sure that these athletes are feeding the system by going to college and not being paid. So many times people have come up to me for the last 30 years, not one, not three, not 13. I know I don't look like I played college ball 30 years ago. 30 years.
It does look
We've been vilified for this topic. It's not just about the records. For me, it's about the acknowledgement and the respect that we brought to the game. And I see conversations being had about who would have profited the most. Let me tell y'all something. Y'all see those Huaraches we wearing? They was getting paid off of those then. They re-released them 20 years later. They just re-released some. Y'all see those black socks that we're wearing? They weren't selling those. The first time we was wearing black socks, Greeny, we went to the mall. They only had 3 pair. I was wearing dress socks on top of white socks. Okay? So when you talk about profiting, we showed the world that they can make money off of everything. Off sleeves, off elbow pads, off headbands, off of all of that stuff. So where my check? Where my royalties? Where my reparations? Talk to me.
Honestly, I love it. You know how much I love when people actually like get into it. I love that. And I love that he made the documentary. Like, I love that he is like using his position in the media and influence to like set the record
sort
straight.
of rewrite this story.
Yeah.
And then last thing, I wanted to put one final button on this episode. The Fab Five stuck together through all the years, before Jalen was just talking there. But they had sort of their differences because Chris Webber was actually like close to going to jail for this, and it was like bad for him. So he really escaped this and didn't really associate himself with them. I think they were always talking as friends, but publicly they never really appeared together. You never knew if they were going to go back to Michigan. And
well, when there's so much controversy, and it's obviously like with Chris Webber, like he probably felt like the more distance I can put, the better off I will be.
Right.
Perception
just
wise.
Don't mention it. Let it move on.
Yeah.
Anyway, this season with their Fab Five member, Juwan Howard, coaching Michigan, he's been there for a little while now. The Fab Five players sat courtside together at a Michigan game against Ohio State for the first time that they were all together associated with Michigan. It just happened.
It just happened?
Earlier this year.
Oh my God.
Look at that. Jalen Rose, Chris Webber, Jimmy, and Ray with Juwan coaching the Fab Five.
Oh my God.
Oh man, what a great picture.
It's crazy.
See, Jimmy,
this gives me goosebumps.
You would have been a part of the Fab Five, and they'd still be talking about you today. That time when they were playing, there was never anything like that. I mean, the black socks, the baggy shorts, the swagger.
Yeah, so they were all back together at Michigan this year, and it's just cool seeing them together, especially after
that was
hearing the whole story.
Yeah, so sweet. They went through so much. And like the thing about sports history is that it lingers. So like if you bring this story up, like you said, to people who know it, like Jalen Rose's point, like this has followed me around for 30 years. Yeah. And so it's just so special to see them all together and like they've all come out the other side of it. Yeah, and I had no idea that this group of men was so influential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, you saw Jalen Rose, or maybe you would have seen some of these other guys like coaching or around as public figures or on a broadcast, but you'd never really know the context.
There is like, and this goes for like all sports in general. It's like, I'm not a sports lover, but through being in a relationship with you, I get to learn so much of the backstory and the context so that, when you're watching a game, obviously, if you're watching Juwan Howard coach, you're not going to like see any evidence of this story in his coaching, obviously, but it makes watching him coach cooler probably to be like, oh my God, there's so much context and backstory here.
So I think I mean, that's sort of the premise of the show, but you're sort of seeing like why people end up liking sports more than on just like a superficial level.
Right.
It's because they've sort of like followed the human dramas of all these people, and they all connect way more than you would think. Like people who played and had drama in the 90s are now on TV talking about the sport. So like these same guys are around.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I'm sure there are people who watch sports for the actual just mechanics and play of the game. I will probably never be that person. I will definitely be, I already am, and I'm becoming more the person that's like, wait a minute, these two are playing each other? I thought they were on a team together and they hated each other, or like whatever.
Yeah, so that's the Fab Five story. As we go into March, you'll have that context when it inevitably comes up a million times when broadcasters mention it or it's referenced. So that is the story of the Fab Five. Thanks so much for listening. And if you enjoyed the show, like we said up top, leave a review. Subscribe on Patreon for more episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Bye.